What stinks?
I'm not sure, okay?
Oh, you gotta put that thing in the wash. You gotta wash that thing. It's dirty.
Well, you wear the same clothes all the time.
I shower with my clothes on so they stay clean. Well, that's how I do it.
Hi everyone, Stinkthinny Smell Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Denzel Curry album, Taboo. Taboo is the newest album from Miami rapper Denzel Curry, who was showing great potential earlier this decade with his nostalgic 64 release, an album of raw, hardcore hip-hop with a lot of dark, very cynical lyricism that set him apart from a lot of the other young rappers in his field. And even though Curry isn't necessarily seen up there with the Kendricks and Drakes of hip-hop, he has shown himself to have the longevity of a superstar. Even 5 years in rap right now is like a lifetime, and Curry only seems to be getting better and more relevant with each new release. You have his sister EPs, 32Zell and Planet Shrimps, which featured the viral Ultimate, an incredible track that worked itself into a lot of memes this decade that kind of launched Denzel's career to another level and helped him overcome some of the missteps of those EPs. Then there was the incredibly fantastic Imperial, dropped in 2016, originally a SoundCloud mixtape, kind of one-dimensional with it being banger after banger after banger, but Curry still had the technical ability, the flow, the aggression to make himself stand out in a field of Lil Uzi and Lil Yachty copycats. Not to mention this album sounded even better upon its 2017 reissue, making it an official commercial release on LOMA VISTA Records, where Curry still finds himself now shoulder to shoulder with artists like St. Vincent and Ghost. Imperial featured fantastic tracks like ULT and Naughty Head, and showed massive improvement in Denzel's hook game, as a lot of the choruses on this thing were now sung and incredibly catchy. The hype off this release got Denzel a 2016 XL freshman spot. In 2017, he kind of kept fans satisfied with his 13 EP, but none of the material on that, in my opinion, could have prepared us for what Denzel was going to deliver on Taboo. Again, this is the man's new album, and it is split up into 3 acts. And across this thing, Denzel can be heard upping the ante on the explosive trap-flavored hardcore hip-hop that he's known for already, and also expanding his talents into more thoughtful lyricism, into more melodic and mellow tracks. So rather than coming through with like an overarching theme that plays throughout the entire record, though the idea of taboos does come up here and there, Denzel has structured this album in a different way. You have 3 separate sections of the album that range from 4 to 5 tracks. Each of them feel kind of like their own mini suite, reinforcing a similar vibe or mood. It's not completely watertight, as cuts like Sumo at the very end of Act 1 don't really add up all that much for me. The 3 separate sections of this thing are supposed to represent light, gray, and dark. Kind of like the sections of the album are on a spectrum of positivity and negativity. I mean, you could maybe say that Sumo is more confident and braggadocious than some of the songs later on the record, but out of context with the record, it just kind of feels like a self-glorifying trap banger in the vein of ASAP Ferg's Trap Lord, with lots of grimy, fat bass riffs rumbling their way through the instrumental. And is this song somehow lighter than the next track, Super Saiyan Superman, which is technically a part of the second act of the record? The song is also a trap banger. It's not nearly as aggressive. It's kind of cloudy, somewhat dreamy, and is similarly egotistical. And let's rewind it back to the title track, the opening track, Taboo. I mean, is this not one of the darker tracks on the album as well? With Curry rapping about somebody who he clearly cares about or has feelings for, and the struggles this person has gone through, even molestation at a very young age. The song does kind of have a cautionary refrain warning the listener to pick the right path or they'll lose, and he also displays a lot of love and devotion for the person he's rapping about on this track. But again, I kind of feel like the lightness or darkness of certain songs on this record can kind of be left up to interpretation. I'm sure for Denzel all of this adds up, but from an outsider's perspective, I don't know if the 3 sections of this album are as defined as they could have been. I also think the water gets even muddier when you consider that Denzel across this album raps from, I guess, a few different personalities of his own invention, including his own personal self, then Denny Cascade, the black metal terrorist, all of which seem to be a different filter through which Denzel kind of processes different emotions or allows himself to write from a different perspective. It does bring a lot of personality to Taboo, even if the intentions behind adding this dynamic to the record seemed kind of unclear. Even though the concept of this album didn't reach its full potential, I can say two things definitively about this record. One, that the material generally does get darker and more tortured and more despondent as the album progresses. The carefree vibe of Cash Maniac is a pretty sharp contrast to the Blackest Balloon. And also, this album features Curry's best crop of songs yet. Period. And it really is, because in comparison with Imperial, like, there are improvements on all fronts with this album. The production, the songs, the rapping, the guests, who might not have the most star power but brought an incredible amount of talent to this thing. The intro and title track, Taboo, is a great tone setter for the album. Features what sounds like some really sparkly guitars, some soaring vocal harmonies. There's a pretty clear Outkast influence flowing throughout this track, but it feels like it's been updated for the trap generation. Curry's delivery on this track has only gotten more dynamic and emotive, really feeling every bar that's coming out of his mouth. It's not quite the kind of monotone and rapid-fire rapping that some people who have been listening to him for a while might be used to up until this point. He still pulls it out for some of the faster and more aggressive tracks on here, really only using it when it's necessary. We also have the surprisingly smooth Black Balloons, which has the super crisp beat that's like a fusion of hip-hop and dance music with this really catchy kick, hi-hat, snare, hi-hat pattern, which sits underneath some really wavy, enveloping synthesizers. And the lyrics on this track are essentially about the dark things in your life or the nasty things in your life kind of haunting you, making it impossible for you to get away. He represents these burdens with black balloons floating over his head as he brings up issues such as depression and suicide. And personally, while I've never really been a big Goldlink guy, his guest verse on this track isn't really that bad. It's super compelling, a little playful at points, and even though I'm not that crazy about the nasally tone of his voice, the flow is very unique. The song Cash Maniac is maybe the most positive and feel-good song on the entire record, with Denzel finding himself on top of this very dreamy synth-funk instrumental. It's kind of like a West Coast throwback. I could easily hear Dre and Snoop getting back together for some kind of revivalist hit on this cut. The lyrics essentially about Denzel living his best life in a way, making some silly references here and there, saying things like, "That's me at my lowest, no Peter Griffin," or "Back at my palace, I'm fly like Aladdin, serving my fans all my dope cause they addicts, haters mad cause I'm on top like an addict." I will just chalk that up to the playful vibe of the song and leave it at that. You know, while I love the energy level of tracks like Sumo and Super Saiyan, they're just two cuts that to me don't really read as being that special in the Denzel Curry canon. They're really some of the most unoriginal tracks on the album. They feel like generic trap bangers. If anything makes them listenable, it is Curry's brutal delivery and his hilarious points of reference. By contrast, the track Switch It Up is a bit more topical, with Curry rapping about this emotional binary, bipolarism, being nice, being mean, being raw, being green, being betrayed, switching it up, changing, being inconsistent. This is just a smattering of the polarized opposites that Denzel kind of presents on this track. And of course, it's another moment on the album where the instrumental hits hard, the energy level is high, the delivery from Curry is intense. The song Mad I Got It, by comparison, is much more toned down. It's despondent, it's spacious. It's a song about jealousy and hatred kind of destroying the relationships around him as his life changes, as according to the fame that he has attained from the music that he's making. Maybe the very changes that he was talking about in the previous track, Switch It Up. I love the slow, dramatic instrumental on this track, the plucky and eerie lead melodies that play throughout it. There's also a dreamy beat switch in the last leg that causes Denzel to rap from a slightly different perspective, which is kind of refreshing too. The song Sirens feels like a shotgun blast of social commentary, with Denzel touching down on everything from MAGA to milk carton kids. There's also a point where he likens the trauma of living in the US to date rape, bringing up things like the lying, the gaslighting, the poverty, the systematic racism, the violence. Jid brings an amazing guest verse onto the song, maybe the best guest verse on the entire album. The flow is incredible, the lyricism is top-notch. Every year the dude seems to get better and better, and I cannot wait for him to drop another commercial project. Following that track is the amazing CLOUT COBAIN, which was a lead single from this thing, and is a sharp commentary on clout chasing, with Denzel saying, "I don't even know what to feel, they don't even know what's real, dry tears with a dollar bill. I'm out trying to make a mill. Oh, the track says a lot about the current state that viral internet rappers find themselves in. We have plenty of recent examples of rappers ODing, showing that they're really wild and out there, that they're super depressed. Bonk is another example that comes to mind. Seeing the downward spiral of attention-seeking stunts and drugs that he's kind of caught himself in the middle of, it's like he's deteriorating right in front of us on the internet. There's also the nightmarish The Blackest balloon on this album, in which Denzel feels like he's trapped in a twisted world where nothing makes sense. Claims that his late brother is calling to him, and that his surroundings feel like a horror movie. Going as far as to say in the song, "Ain't shit changed since Lil Peep died," which is something I and many other people have talked about. Maybe with some people on the outside, they have kind of changed their ways and this situation gave them pause. But the root causes that sort of brought Peep and many others to this fate have not changed at all. And for someone like Denzel, who's in the industry and dealing with these people face to face, who are likely making similar decisions, stuff has not changed. Shit is the same. The beat on this cut sounds like a fusion between just a trap instrumental and a horror movie soundtrack, with some shouty chorus vocals that are kind of blood-curdling, like Denzel himself is crying out for help. Meanwhile, the song PERCS seems a lot like a critique of the culture born out of SoundCloud rap right now. It slightly reminds me of some of the criticisms someone like Hobson has had of it over the years, but Denzel Curry actually has the talent and the personality for his criticisms to actually hold weight. Instrumentally, it's yet another banger on the album, but Denzel is able to keep things interesting with his focus on a topic, with his flow, his delivery. The song Vengeance is a pretty decent moment on the album, even though the beat isn't really all that crazy to me and the hook is sort of whatever. Really what the selling point of the track is that you have some good guest verses from JPEG Mafia and Zilla Kami. They have great chemistry on the track, breaks things up a little bit, and sets the stage for a relatively strong ending with Black Metal Terrorist, which adds character to the flow of the album as one of the hardest songs on the entire record finishes things off, and one of the mellower songs on the record kicking things off, pretty much the inverse of most albums. Lyrically, there are a few moments on this song, as there are with others here, that might smell, I don't know, a little too edgy, but still it is a very nasty ending to the record. I do love the calls of "finish him" at the very start of the song. The track finishes with a short instrumental break, and the album closes as easily Denzel Curry's best project so far. Loving this album is pretty easy, as nearly every track on it is fantastic. I love that Denzel brought stronger hooks on this album, brought back the trippy and smoother production from Planet Shrooms, but really pulled it off this time. Brought those insane and aggressive flows and deliveries from Imperial, but also had the emotional dynamics and the great topical focus of Nostalgic 64. But of course, all of these things being updated, pushed forward, progressed, and improved. I do think there are a few tracks on here that are maybe a little unoriginal, and the concept overall, the separate acts of the album, didn't really add up for me. It's pretty easy to listen through this entire 43-minute album without paying much attention to what act you're in, which act is starting, which one is ending. In that respect, if Denzel is going to approach his next record with a concept, I think it needs to be better fleshed out. It needs to be clearer, more apparent, and more ambitious. But even without those elements functioning at a very high level, the core material on this album is great. The songs are great, production great, rapping, lyricism great. And as a result, I'm feeling a decent to strong 8 on this thing. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like, please subscribe, and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up, or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano. Yeah, Denzel Curry. Forever.